Right, next up is Issy Towell. She is a wearables analyst at CCS Insight. She has been doing some important work on Femtech and everything to do with women in wearables and the design. We're going to look back at where we've been and the issues we've had, and hopefully look forward to where we're going next. So
absolutely.
Take it away.
James. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Hello, I'm Issy Towell. As James said, I'm a wearables analyst at CCS Insight. We provide market research and analysis to a load of different companies across the wearables value chain. So anyone from suppliers to manufacturers to distributors. And we're in the very privileged position of having having so many contacts across the industry. And as James said, I am particularly embedded at the minute in looking at Femtech. And I have to say, I'm so happy to see so many men in the audience today. I think that does speak to an existing gender imbalance in the consumer tech industry. But more importantly than that, I think I'm in such a privileged position to be able to be an advocate for these technologies that you are just less likely to know about. Because as I know, advocates for Femtech and individuals working in Femtech believe, and I certainly believe, I'm sure you all believe too, that Femtech 100% should be everybody's business. Because just because you haven't got a hormone cycle, I'm 100% certain that everybody in this room has important females in their life, be that your mums, friends, colleagues, wives, daughters, who go through these lived experiences. And I think it's important to be educated, to support those women through that. And to be honest as well, men do feel the symptoms of the female hormone cycle, obviously indirectly, but you do to an extent, and I think it's important to be educated on it. So, and I should add also as well, pretty much every man that I've ever spoken to or engaged with on this topic is really, excited, energized to learn more as well. So we'll start the conversation with that. The first myth that I want to debunk about Femtech overall, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time defining it, is that Femtech is not about products built by women for women, although oftentimes that is the case. Femtech is about creating products, services, solutions for people to try and reach better healthcare outcomes for health conditions that differently, disproportionately, or solely affect women and girls. And I think that the health and safety of women and girls is everybody's problem, not just women. So, what is Femtech? Femtech is a subset of healthcare technology. And when I first started researching this area, I was like, why do we need a separate name for it? Why can't we just talk about it as healthcare tech? Why do we have to be othered again and have this separate name? And there's a really interesting story why we've got this name for Femtech, and I'll spend a minute just kind of taking you through that. So it has to do with a company called Clue, which you can see there. Now, Clue was one of the OG menstrual cycle tracking applications in the market, and it was founded by an amazing Danish entrepreneur called Ida Tin. In 2016, she's going to the TechCrunch event, TechCrunch Disrupt. Her and her team are so excited. They're going to go to this event. They're going to, schmooze the VCs and the investors, and they're so well prepped. And they get there, and they're kind of a bit flattened because nobody seems that interested in what they've got to say. And they're like, oh, this is a numbers game. We're going to reach half of the population with this technology. Why is there not more excitement? And they are kind of scratching their heads, and they realize that they feel that the industry just really isn't connecting to this idea of women's health. And at that point, women's health was referred to in lots of different kinds of terminology, so women's health, fertility tracking, reproductive health. And she remarks that a lot of the investors, and they were predominantly male investors that she was talking to, were just sort of like, what is women's health? I don't really understand the customer problem. What is it you're getting at here? And so she really consciously decided that they needed a name that people could identify with and latch onto and get excited about. And so she developed Femtech, not to be confused with FinTech, although I think that the likeness to the word FinTech and she believes it really helped her get some more excitement behind the idea, genuinely. And she talks a lot about this. Honestly, if you can access any content by Ida, do it, because she speaks so eloquently. And she talks about the fact that investment is as much of a social game as it is a numbers game. So she really felt that this term, Femtech, was kind of a more sanitized term that people could get on board with. They weren't so comfortable with women's health. And since then, the rest is history. They've raised a huge amount of investment, so much excitement. There's been so many more products. User bases have really kind of skyrocketed. And we are left with this whole new industry called Femtech. And I think oftentimes Femtech is kind of conflated with a lot of these menstrual cycle tracking apps like Clue and Flow, which still represent a huge part of that market. But Femtech is so much more vast than the menstrual cycle tracking opportunity. And I just thought, while we are going to be talking about menstrual cycle tracking today, that I really wanted to kind of define this in its more holistic sense. So as I said, Femtech applies to conditions that affect all women from cradle to grave. So of course, we've got those hormone cycle tracking use cases, so things related to fertility, contraception, obviously menstrual cycles, the menopause, also related to maternal health, so pre, during, and post pregnancy, so things like breastfeeding, pelvic floor health, so things like urinary incontinence, as well as fecal incontinence, which is so much more common than you might know if you or your partner have never been through a pregnancy. So here we've got LV, which is a pelvic floor trainer, which has done fantastically well. Also, solutions and applications related to sexual wellness, so things like discomfort during sex, which is disproportionately felt by females. Other chronic diseases, PCOS, endometriosis, other health conditions like that disproportionately affect women and girls, like eating disorders. So many more. I could go on and on and on. And the crucial part of this, all of this for me, is that it's some of these symptoms, some of these conditions are felt by half of the population. And so as I've come into this research field, I was so confused and curious. Why is it that this area has only received investment in the relative, close past? Why is it only just started to come about? And I think if we're talking about product innovation, we have to talk about customer needs, right? And I think I've just tried to tell you that 100% is a customer need from half of the population for these things. So why are we only getting investment now? And I remembered this conversation that I had with one of my male friends not too long ago, and I was writing this speech, and we're talking about Femtech, and I've had a couple of glasses of wine, and I'm spouting, and giving all my opinions. And he was like, and I love this guy, by the way, he was like, Izzy, if there really was a customer need for these things, the solution would have already been like, there would already be products. And I was like, oh. I was so annoyed, I was so defensive. We had a really robust debate on the night. But as I've reflected since that conversation, I kind of got to thinking it was a very, very poorly worded argument, but I think he had a point, because women are very hesitant to come forward and talk openly about their health problems related to women's health, 100%. And we know from research that women are hesitant to talk about this even with their partners. Friends, family, 100% are hesitant to talk about it with medical professionals for fear of being turned away and told, look, women have been going through this for centuries, get on with it, shut up, goodbye. And so I was thinking about that, and I think it's no wonder really that investment hasn't come sooner, because we've got women who aren't necessarily shouting out for these products and solutions. We've got investors who aren't necessarily hearing that coming from women and aren't necessarily able to visualize that opportunity. And then add to that, we've got unbalanced workplaces where the people and the organizations that are tasked with coming up with the most innovative solutions haven't got an equal female split. So it's a complicated picture overall, but because I guess what I'm talking about really is systematic inequality and the compounding effect of gender imbalances in the workplaces that are tasked with coming up with solutions, combined with the role of women in society, the role of women's health in society, that gets this, the women's health agenda pushed down the agenda and out of public consciousness. And the result of this, I'm arguing, is that we end up with gender-biased products as the result of this. So a classic example is this good old seatbelt example. I heard that on Women's Hour today, actually, as well today. So I think I've turned this off. Hello? Sorry, we're back. So the seatbelt example was when automotive first was being regulated, they said, look, you need seatbelts these days. And they were like, oh gosh, really, have we got to? And turns out they tested the seatbelts on men and not women, which resulted in a higher female mortality rate in cars. We also see inequitable outcomes in the medical profession because medical testing typically used to only be on men because it's much more costly, much more difficult to test on women, obviously because they have a hormone cycle. And this resulted in drugs being made that had to be recalled because obviously there were loads of unexplored side effects in women. So we see it come through there. We also see lack of pharmaceutical innovation for women as well and for women's health problems. So really good example, and somebody should really go away and fact check me this because I heard it on a podcast. But this example is that the abortion pill, which obviously, unfortunately, is so relevant today, and I'm just too upset to really go there, is the abortion pill, the compound that makes that, has not been updated really that much since it was invented half a century ago, whereas Viagra has so many different iterations, improvements over the years. It's just ridiculous. And then, of course, over here, we end up with gender-biased products in consumer tech as well. And obviously, that's why we're all here today. And I'm wearing, obviously, this horrendous smartwatch on my wrist here. This one, which I won't put on. I mean, oh my goodness. When you actually Google products that are made for everyone, but that are actually made for men, the best and the most kind of prevalent example on the internet is the smartwatch. As you can see here, why? And of course, when smartwatches first came to be, 2013, 2014, they just weren't built with women in mind. It's not a product that is relevant for women at that size. It looks super masculine, hyper masculine. But since then, we've seen a little bit of innovation in terms of the physical design. So, well done, Samsung, for making a really masculine smartwatch in a smaller size for women. Great job. And it's a similar kind of story with all of the other providers. And I think, to be honest, to be fair, that's kind of helpful. It meets women in the middle, with a smaller size, something that's a little bit more relevant. But I really believe, and I think when we speak to clients about smartwatches and gender, we always come back to the design conversation. But when we run consumer surveys on that topic, actually, we find that design is just as much of a pain point for men as it is for women. I think if we're going to effectively grow this category for several years and reach peak penetration, then we need to be thinking about features that actually benefit women's lives. And I think today I'm going to be talking about, obviously, menstrual cycle tracking and using skin temperature to do that, because I think this is an area where we can actually support women, add value to women's lives, and keep and retain them in the category. So I think if I'm going to be talking about skin temperature tracking and the menstrual cycle, probably beneficial to have a quick biology refresher. I don't really don't mean to patronize anyone here. I didn't know a lot of this not very long ago. But essentially, the menstrual cycle, obviously, is not just a cycle that happens during that week in the month when you've got a menstrual period. This is something that's happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for women. And the whole, point of the menstrual cycle is to either have a baby, and throughout the menstrual cycle, we get lots of different hormones released out through the body in different quantities throughout the cycle. And that helps release an egg, helps prepare the uterus lining for a fertilized embryo. Then it also promotes the kind of shedding of the uterus lining at the end of the cycle. And this cycle varies from woman to woman, so it's from anywhere between 25 to 35 days, depending on the woman. And because of those hormones, we get lots of different changes in the body, and that's things like increased heart rate, different ways of recovering from exercise and things like that. And why is this important? Well, why would a customer actually want better insight into their menstrual cycle? Obviously, if we're thinking about customer needs, there are several reasons why somebody might want that information. So firstly, and most topically, if you are trying to conceive, struggling to conceive in a partnership, and you want to increase your chances, it's jolly well useful to know when you might be ovulating. Equally, if you're trying not to conceive, and again, this is very, very topical at the moment, also very interesting to know when you might be ovulating. And when I talk about this subject to people, at this point, this is where people completely run out of ideas. They're like, well, as long as you know when you're going to be ovulating, that's fine. But in reality, the female menstrual cycle, the female hormone cycle affects women in a myriad of different ways. And as I said earlier, many of the men in this room probably have felt indirectly some of these symptoms as well. So of course, mood, of course the symptoms of PMS, and that's really real for a lot of people. For some people, that PMS period is actually quite tricky, can result in extreme anxiety and depression in the worst cases, but then for some people it's much more manageable. In addition to mood, it can also help women with their health and fitness goals too. So this is something that people don't really know about. But in the first half of your cycle, your follicular phase, that's the kind of pink area over there, this is also called your low hormone phase. And because there's less hormones going through your body, or a higher incidence of progesterone in this example, women in the first half of their cycle are actually better placed to build muscle in this time because you are better at recovering after strenuous exercise. Your body is usually getting better quality of sleep. Whereas in the luteal phase, this is when your progesterone increases. This is actually quite a hard time to build muscle because you feel more fatigue, you feel it's harder to recover. And as a result, understanding more about your cycle would help you to kind of plan your fitness regime in a better way to kind of maximize your results. Also very interesting and important to note that this progesterone line, this purple one there, this is different for every woman. So for some women, the rapid increase of progesterone happens very, very quickly, so over the course of maybe 2 days. For other women, it's much longer and drawn out, and the effect of that progesterone increase is fatigue, things like moodiness. So you can imagine, if that's happening for you in the course of 2 days versus 6 days, you're probably likely to have a more intense PMS period. So, hopefully I've managed to convince you that there is some value in understanding the menstrual cycle better. But interesting to know kind of where we've come from on wearables as well. So what has the wearables industry been doing for women to help them increase their knowledge of their own menstrual cycle? And actually, before 2018, there wasn't a whole lot. On wearable health platforms before 2018, basically what they provided was a logging calendar for women. So it was basically another kind of calendar, a kind of personal database of where you could remark back and see, oh yeah, I had my period at this time last year. As part of that feature, there was no kind of predictive element or anything. It wouldn't tell you when you were going to get your next period or when you were likely to be ovulating or anything like that. In 2018, Fitbit introduced a period prediction feature. And what this is trying to, as I just said, trying to predict when your next period would be. But all this was really using was your inputted period data. And it used that and then worked out an average and then would guess when you would be having your next period. And then fast forward to 2022, not a whole lot's changed except for the fact that all of the mainstream wearables players have now adopted that period prediction feature. And that period prediction is very much like all of the other menstrual cycle tracking apps in the market, so just uses that self-inputted data and gives you a prediction. And to be honest, that feature is useful to a point, especially if you're looking to use this for a fertility use case or you're using it to be able to prepare for your period. But beyond that, this method isn't really helping you learn a whole lot about your individual cycle. So as I mentioned before, that progesterone release is quite different for different women. If you've got a really rapid kind of increase, then you're not going to know how different that is from somebody else. So you might have a cycle that's the same length as somebody else, but your symptoms will be quite different. But there's lots and lots of innovation going on in the wearables industry now, trying to use biometric data as an input for that period prediction and ovulation prediction. And I think the most interesting area for innovation is in the skin temperature tracking that we're seeing coming onto some wearables. And the reason why you can use that is because skin temperature tracking is correlated to that increase in progesterone release. So we're going to be looking specifically now at two really kind of key propositions that I'm interested in at the minute. And it's important to say that there are some fertility-focused solutions on the market that have been using skin temperature for a while and have been FDA approved, but I wanted to really zero in on these particular propositions because these aren't just aimed at people who want to use this solution to get pregnant or avoid getting pregnant. These are kind of aimed at the general market to increase awareness about your own menstrual cycle. And I think that's important because if there's anything you take away from this presentation, it's that, you know, female women's health doesn't just happen on a fertility journey, it's from cradle to grave. So the first device that we're going to look at is the Oura Ring. It's actually what I've got on my finger here. I love doing this because everyone's like, ooh. But if you've never seen this up close, definitely catch me afterwards because it's such an elegant piece of technology and just amazing the way they pack in here. So Oura is, of course, a device that I've been using for a while. And Oura is a Finnish company, and I guess they're most famous, really, for the ring form factor that they introduced into the market. And also, at brand level, they kind of have this personality of being more about holistic health outcomes, wellness, things like that. And how this solution works for period prediction is it has 7 temperature sensors, if you can believe it, in this ring. And they've been tracking skin temperature for a long time, but at the end of last year, they released their skin temperature period prediction beta. That just means that users can opt into the trial or not. And if this gets through approval, which they really, really hope it will, this will be the first non-fertility focused solution on the market with a period prediction that has a biometric input into that algorithm. So using information from the body to inform that prediction. And how it works is you wear it overnight, and at some point overnight, it will take your skin temperature readings, and it will tell you how your skin temperature has deviated from your personal baseline. And do I like this product? I really like this product. If you weren't aware, I've been wearing this product for 3 months now, and I think what I like about it is I feel it has empowered me to try and find out more about my personal cycle. So I am a young female, I am not looking to start a family anytime soon, and to be honest, I also have a really irregular period too. So for me, if I feel that my period is late in a given month, I can look on my app, I can see, oh gosh, my skin temperature looks like it's going up, great, I'm in the clear, no worries, to be honest. And I think that this is it's a great product. It makes you so much more aware of your own feelings. I'm thinking so much more about my mood. I feel I'm more self-compassionate because I'm like, oh, well, actually, I am having PMS. I'm not just being unreasonable. And I guess the only drawback about this product at the minute is that it focuses a lot on getting the user to go and interpret your own data. So until it's got that feature approved, you go into your own app and you kind of try and analyze your own period data. And I'm an analyst. I like data. I'm interested and motivated to look at my own data. So I think it will be much better if it can kind of feed that information directly to the consumer. But really good kind of basis for moving forward. And then beyond that, just the design. For me, I'm somebody who wears a lot of clunky, big gold jewelry, so style-wise, I like it. But beyond that, I think the form factor for me is unintrusive. I don't always like something that's pinging at me all the time. I like that I can choose how I interact with the data from this, and I choose when and how I interact with that data. And beyond that, they make it easy to wear all the time because you've only got to charge it once a week. Like somebody like Apple could never do this because you just can't be relied on to charge it every night before bed. And I know they've got fast charging now, but it's just not realistic for my lifestyle. I'm a very lazy consumer. So anyway, Oura Ring, great. Big star from me, room for improvement. And then I know I'm probably running out of time. Sorry, James. But the final thing that we'll talk about before we end is the Whoop band, which is on the right. If you haven't heard of Whoop, Whoop is a wearable subscription company, so you don't pay for the device, but you pay for the privilege of using their platform, and you pay $30 a month to use it, which is a lot. But Whoop, as a company, is more focused on recovery insights and sleep analysis. So rather than focusing on how much did you push yourself in a given workout, it focuses a lot more on how are you recovering from that, what sleep should you be getting in order to reach maximum recovery, and so on. And I've become very interested in what Whoop is doing to try and support women manage and understand their menstrual cycle, because they've been investing, they've been commissioning internal research, so pinch of salt, but they've been commissioning a lot of internal research about women's propensity to recover during their menstrual cycle. And out of that research has come a women's health feature, which functions a lot like those other period prediction features that I was talking about, so using your self-inputted period data. But using that data, it will give the user personalized feedback about how to respond in relation to their health and fitness. So rather than an Oura Ring that says, wear this device, then go, analyze your own data, then make some inferences about it, which is what I'm doing at the moment, and just kind of guessing to some extent. What the Whoop band does is it says, look, you're probably going to get your period in a few days. Maybe focus on less strenuous exercise, or if that's not available to you, say you've got a race or something, try and find other areas where you can get that restoration in. So maybe more sleep, maybe mindfulness, maybe just taking some time out for you, some self-care, etc. So I like these two things for different reasons. I think that the Whoop band, if they can manage to leverage that biometric data and combine that with the personalized insights that it's offering, I think that will be a much more compelling proposition. And ultimately, I think if these women's health features are going to become mainstream, I think we're going to have to get closer to that idea of giving consumers personalized feedback in real time that responds to their biometric data. And that is the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I would absolutely love it if everyone can go home and talk to whoever's at home for you about this subject. There might be some people saying, that's a load of all rubbish, snowflakes. Or you might have some really interesting conversations, and please message me on LinkedIn if you do have an interesting conversation or an interesting perspective, because I'm always happy to talk about it. So thank you very much for your attention.